Yeah, that's better. Welcome back to another Outdoor Philosophy. We are going to continue our discussion of the Lucifer Principle. And as last time, there are some Christian, more Christian type things I wanted to say. And so those comments are going to be on the Christian channel, and I will card those where I can. For now, though, what we're going to do is continue to the next chapter where, once again, the author here, as he approaches his argument from a different worldview than I have. But that being said, we're going to go ahead and have a look at what he happens to say in this second section of the book, which he titles Bloodstains in Paradise. And what his entire thesis is that as humans, we are inherently violent and destructive. And it doesn't matter to him what is the cause or the root. He basically is just saying this is how we are. And so we're going to kind of talk about this in light of everything else that we're going to talk about, just kind of carrying through. And I'm just going to go through, flip through some of the more telling things that he says, and then just kind of give my thoughts and my arguments. Of course, what he's trying to say is that violence is just inherent inside of us, and the reality is we don't need to be quite that same way, although it is in general our nature. I mean, what did Arnold Schwarzenegger say on Terminator 2? It is in your nature to destroy yourselves, you know, and that might have been on the director's cut that I have, I don't know. But anyway, he starts out in the first of the chapters in this section is Mother Nature, the bloody female dog, I believe is a good word, because I don't say that other word on this channel. But anyway, he's kind of talking about just nature itself is just a bloody mess. And so they kind of dive in initially just kind of talking about how as people we tend to domineer where we are. We tend to dive into things. We tend to as people, conquer cultures that are different from ours. We argue with people who are different from us. But he says it's not just us humans. It goes into people as well. Whereas he starts in on civilizations, he kind of starts in looking at just fish, at insects. Just everything in and of itself is fighting for survival in the world. You know, while this sea turtles may lay thousands of eggs, a very small number of sea turtles survive the small trip from the nest into the ocean because of the hungry birds that are up there plucking them off, as it were. Now, it says here, Hegel, the 19th century German philosopher, said that true tragedy occurs not when good battles evil, but when one good battles another. Nature's made that form of tragedy a basic law of her universe. She presents her children with a choice between death and death. She offers a carnivore the option of dying by starvation or killing for a meal. So what the author is trying to say here is that inherently there is this twisted violence inside of the world. And as he says, you know, that always is and always will be. And what I want to say is, without going too much into the religious aspect, is that there is nothing inconsistent with how our world is versus how we were created in the fall. And you can check out the video. It will be carded wherever they happen to be carded. I forget. You can see where I respond to that in a more Christian way on a video. But anyway, I'm going to take an argument to say that while this is how nature is, it's not always how nature has been. The specific point in time led to that, and you can check out that other video for some information. Now, of course, they end out talking about this woman who lived among these this chimpanzees, I believe, Fosse it was, and she lives among this group of primates for a while, and just kind of says it was chimpanzees, and kind of says that these cultures and people don't war. But it was a very short period of time later that we found out that yes, indeed, there is war among the chimpanzees. And much like us as people, and it's just an inherent thing in nature itself. But of course, from the Christian viewpoint, we argue that it was the fall that caused that to happen. And here he just says it just kind of caused that to happen. But basically, the entire first chapter is just about how nature itself is just a giant bloody war and a feud. Now, of course, a lot of people start talking about the violence, and in some particular views of our modern world, starts to want to start blaming men. I mean, I'm a white Christian male, and to some groups out there, I am about the most offensive person there is. And you know what? Hate me even more. I own guns too. Oh my Lord, he's evil. He's of the devil. But of course, some of these groups come out and say, we just need more women in the place to balance things out with a woman's nurturing love. Well, before you go down that path, the next chapter, the author says, is women, not the peaceful creatures you think. And in this chapter, he goes through all of the examples of where you start to see women being just as violent in the world as you start seeing men. Starting, of course, like the author of this book does, starts with the primates and starts with other cultures, looking at the specific primate lands where the gorillas will destroy all of the children, not much unlike what we read in the Old Testament, where God tells a nation, go in there and wipe out, for example, the Amalekites. He tells Saul to go and wipe out entirely the Amalekites, kill the women, kill the men, kill the children, kill everyone. Well, we see that represented in nature, where packs of primates, gorillas, for example, will cannibalize and kill the young if a domineering male overtakes the tribe, so that then they will then repopulate the entire tribe with this new male's offspring instead of the old male's offspring. And what was found out was fascinating is it was the females killing the babies, not the males killing the babies. And this kind of happens over and over. And then, of course, they dove in and looked at multiple examples of women leaders in recent history. Margaret Thatcher being one of the ones that they have commented on the most. But they referenced old historical things. They referenced Leva, or it might have been pronounced Lewa in that time, who basically conspired with Caesar Augustus to get out the old wife and get all of her family into the new royal family position for, again, more control. And so the author then goes into multiple examples to indicate that, no, women are not quite as peaceful always. And I gotta say, for sure, you want to see a woman's fury mess with her children. That's a scary thing. And of course, this ties right into the very next thing, his very ultimate thesis. Well, not his ultimate thesis yet, but the very thing is that what we are fighting for is we are fighting for our offspring. In fact, there's a part in here, and I forget exactly if it's this section or this one here. And basically, what it says is that I'm not going to be able to find the exact quote, but the basic gist of it is all of this violence, all of this death, all of this murder that we find throughout the world, all of it seems to be related to us caring for and protecting our own children. So children, the innocent children, being the ultimate cause and the root of all of the murder and destruction that we see in the world. That seems to be what the author is getting at. In fact, they even make that exact comment in here. I'm just not going to remember exactly where it is. But he talks about carrying that item on further, looking at individual populations, native tribes, chimpanzees, various gorillas, all fighting and warring over the ability to procreate successfully. And that's kind of where he's getting at. And that leads to the ultimate culminating thesis, the greed of genes. And I'm also going to have a daily walk on the Christian channel on this particular section, because it bears so much Christian issues I want to talk about with this, but I don't want to get into in this video here, as I keep this one more neutral. But what this next section here is called is the greed of genes. And his overarching thesis of the entirety of this section is that it really isn't us causing all this violence. He tries to take the blame, the shift off of us. Maybe this might be what you might find in Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about people using determinism as an excuse. And we see this all the time. It was my family, it's my genes, it's my genetics. Well, they take the entire argument and say the entirety of violence in our whole world, in our whole culture, is simply us being forced, not by anything logical, not by anything rational, but something inherent inside of our genes. So this is genetic determinism pushed to its nth degree as the final culminating portion of his section. As he writes in here, under the greed of genes, that he's just kind of going into it. Now, he's quoting a whole lot from Richard Dawkins here, and I'm going to respond to Richard Dawkins' specific comments on the Christian video accompanying this. But with that being said, what I want to make clear is that what he's doing is going in and saying that with all of this random chance of everything, we are directed by a very series of connections that we have no control with that forces us to kill for the exclusive right to carry forth our genes. And that's the point I'm going to divulge even further from the author's viewpoint, because the reality is we do have more control over ourselves with that. Now, maybe it's just some of us, and maybe we're seeing this greater decline as people become thinking less and less about crime and what it means and violence and what it means, and becoming more concerned just with our basic instincts. And some people might even say that we are approaching back to a time, we are regressing back to a time of animalistic instincts which had this core of violence. We're losing our civilness of our civilized society. That's what some would argue, and that seems to be the direction where he is moving, is that basically saying that all nature is just wicked and sick and twisted and evil, and we're doing it all in a way that we can't control, exclusively based upon the power of our genes. And I'm going to respond to that in another video on the other channel. But for now, that is the second part of Lucifer Principle. Of course, if you're new to this channel, the outdoor philosophy is just kind of a way that we kind of talk about philosophies and things. And so that's kind of, this is definitely a radically different book than I would usually do in this channel, but it's still a fascinating read through. There is a link to this down in the description below if you want to pick up a copy of this book. You can do that. Once again, you can actually help support the channel here at switchtolinux.com/support. You can learn about all the ways that you can currently help support us. I do have Patreon, patreon.com/TomM to find me on Patreon. And if you do want to pick up something like a Switch to Linux shirt, or I have other things like water bottles, coffee cups, travel mugs, a lot of other things like that, and mouse pads, which I have a nice mouse pad right here. You can find those at shop.switchtolinux.com. So thanks for watching, and hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.